Registers, genres, and styles, fundamental varieties of language, Module 1. Text varieties in your daily life. Before you begin the course, take a minute to think about all the different kinds of text that you encounter over the course of a normal day. In the morning, maybe you have a conversation with a housemate. As you have breakfast, you might listen to a radio announcer or read the news online. Then, you might send a text message to a friend, a family, or a member. As you get ready for a class, you might proofcard a paper that is due that day or look over the reading you did for homework. When you attend the class, you probably talk with your friends, listen to a lecture, and write notes, and that's just the first few hours of your day. For most people, conversation is the most common type of spoken language that they produce. But people typically listen to many different kinds of spoken language. Television shows, commercials, radio, or television news. Reports, classroom lectures, political speeches, sermons, and etc. Written language also plays a very important role in daily life for many people. Students produce many different kinds of writing at school, notes during class, sessions, written, assignment, term papers, essays, and probably also text messages and or email messages. But as with spoken language, most people read more than they will write. In fact, most students read even more different kinds of text than they listen to, including social media, posts, new reports, blogs, text messages, editorials, novels, email, messages, magazines, articles, product reviews, and advertisement, as well as school text, like textbook, research, and articles, course, syllabi, and other written assignment or handouts. This course investigates the language used in these different kinds of text, both spoken and written. You will see how almost any kind of text has its own characteristic linguistic features. For example, it would not be surprising to end a conversation without the following utterance: "Okay, see you later." But it would be almost inconceivable that this sentence would end a textbook. Rather, language like the following is more typical. Process of producing and understanding discourse are matters of human feeling and human interaction, and understanding of these processes in language will contribute a rational as well as ethical and human basis for understanding what it means to be human. The concluding two sentences from Tanin 2005. How are these two examples different linguistically? And why do those different exist? These questions are central to the analysis of text varieties, registers, genres, and styles, the focus of the present course. We use the term registers, genre, and style to refer to three different perspectives on text varieties. The register perspective combines with analysis of linguistics characteristics that are common in a text variety with analysis. The underlying consumption of register perspective is that our linguistic features, pronouns, and verbs serve communicative functions. As a result, some linguistic features are common in the register because they are functionally adapted to the communicative purposes and situational context of text from the register. In contrast, the general's perspective focuses on the conventional structure used to construct a complete text within the variety. For example, the conventional way in which a letter begins and ends. The style perspective is similar to the register perspective in linguistic focus, analyzing the use of linguistic features that are common in text. But the key difference from the register perspective is the use of these linguistic features is not functionally motivated. Rather, style features reflect aesthetic preferences associated with particular author or historical periods. The present course focuses mostly on the register perspective because this perspective is important for the description of all text varieties. This is any text sample of any type can be analyzed from a register perspective. Because the other two perspectives are more specialized, we provide a less true treatment of their characteristic. However, we include discussion of those perspectives at several places in the course, when they are especially useful for understanding the text variety being described. For example, the style perspective is especially useful for comparing fictional prose written by different authors, and the general perspective is especially useful for discussing the structure of academic research articles. We return to much fuller introduction of three perspectives in section 1.4. However, we first take up several more basic issues relating to the study of text varieties and their general role in the language and society. Why is it important to analyze the text varieties? As a native speaker of a language, you acquired many text varieties without explicitly studying them. For example, nobody explained formal rules for having conversations or how the rules change when you converse with your closest friend rather than your mother, or when you converse via text message rather than spoken language. However, many other varieties are usually learned with explicit instruction. For example, if you are training for a job as a preacher, you will probably explicitly learn about the discourse of style of sermons. Similarly, if you are training for a job as a journalist, you will learn about the written conventions of effective news reports. One of the most important goals of formal education is to teach the text varieties that might not be acquired outside of school. Even before going to school, most children are exposed to written stories and learn how narratives are different from normal conversation. Early in school, children learn to read books of many different types, including fictional stories, historical recounts of past events, and description of natural phenomena. These varieties rely on different linguistic structure and patterns, and students must learn how to recognize and interpret those differences. At the same time, primary school students must learn how to produce some of these different varieties, for example, writing a narrative essay, or what they did during summer vacation versus a persuasive essay on whether the social cafeteria should sell candy. The amount of explicit instruction in the different text varieties varies across teachers, schools, and countries, but even at a young age, students must somehow learn to control and interpret the language of different varieties, or they will not succeed at school. Textual tasks become more and more demanding as a student progresses through school. A university education requires the ability to read and understand the academic prose, a variety that is extremely different from a face-to-face conversation. Further, students must learn how to produce written text from the many different specific sub-varieties within academic prose, including persuasive essays in the first-year composition, lab reports in science courses, and summary synthesis prose responses on final exams. One of the main goals of a university education is to learn a specialized register of a particular profession. Whether education is to learn the specialized register or particular profession, whether electrical engineering, chemistry, sociology, finance, or English education, success requires learning the particular language pattern that are expected for particular situations and communicative purposes. The task of learning registers general difference is even more challenging for a non-native speaker or a language. For example, 1,000 of students speaks a language other than English, but those to attend university where the primary language of education is English. Traditionally, these students were taught the generally vocabulary and grammatical rules of English in preparation for advanced study. However, in recent years, many applied linguists have come to realize that this is not enough to ensure student success. Students also need knowledge of registered genre differences to succeed in their university education. This awareness has given rise to the field of English for academic purposes, which focuses on teaching the English language skills that are especially helpful for the registered genre used in universities. Similarly, the field of English helpful for the registered genres focuses on description of the language used in registered genres from a particular profession or particular academic discipline, such as biochemistry or physical therapy. The ultimate goal of EAP and ESP research is to develop instructional materials that will help of students that particular language patterns that are typically for the different kinds of texts and in those fields. But even proficiency with the specific written registers genre is not enough for students and professionals. Some non-native speakers are criticized for sounding too much like a book. When they speak, those proficiency with spoken registers for conversational and meeting is also important. Registers genre and style differences are fundamentally important for any students with a primary interest in language. For example, any student majoring in English or in the study of another language like Japanese or Spanish must understand the text varieties in the language. If you are training to become a teacher, you will shortly be faced with the task of teaching your own students how to use the word structures that are appropriate to different spoken and written tasks. Different registers and genres. Other students of language are more interested in the study of literature or the creative writing of new literature. Issues relating to the style perspective, since the literacy effects that distinguish one novel or poem from the next are realized as linguistic differences. While many literacy scholars and creative writers become highly proficient without formal training in linguistic analysis, the tools provided in the present course provide an additional perspective for those tasks. Overall, then the text varieties and the differences among them constantly affect people's daily lives. Proficiency with these varieties affects not only success as students, but also success as practitioner or of any profession. From engineering to creative writing to teaching, receptive mastery of different text varieties increases access to information, while productive mastery increases the ability to participate in varying communities. And if you cannot analyze a variety that is new to you, you cannot help yourself or others learn to master it. These courses provide the foundational knowledge that you will need effectively analyze, understand, and teach awareness of difference among text varieties. Next is the 1.2 text varieties, registers, and dialects. Variability is inherent in human and language. People use differently linguistic forms in different occasions, and different speakers of language will state the same thing in different ways. Most of this linguistic variation is highly systematic. Speakers of a language make choices in the pronunciation, morphology, word choice, and grammar depending on a number of linguistic or factors. These factors include speakers, purpose in communication, and the relationship between speaker and hearer, the production circumstances, and social characteristics of the speaker. At the highest level, linguistic variation is realized as different languages, Korean, French, and Swahili. As the lowest level, linguistic variation is realized as the difference between one speaker compared to another speaker, or as the differences between two texts produced by the same speaker. In the present course, we use the term text to refer to the natural language used for communication. whether it is realized in speech or writing. This is a research paper. Is a text, it is a novel or news report. In a speech, a sermon, and a face-to-face conversation are both text. The notion of text is somewhat fluid as we use it here. First of all, we sometimes distinguish between a complete, complete, complete text and a text excerpt. A complete text is an instant of extended discourse that has clear start and finish, such as research, article, or sermon. However, many of the texts that we discuss in the research article or a sermon are actually text excerpts, segments of discourse extracted from a large complete text. Thus, we might discuss a text excerpt of 2 to 3 paragraphs from a novel or several turns of interaction from conversation. Further, the notion of complete text in itself somewhat fluid. First, text can be discovered at different levels of generality. Just a chapter in a book might be considered a complete text, but the entire book might also be considered as a complete text. Similarity in spoken language. Joke told during a sermon might be a complete text, but the entire sermon can also be treated as complete text. Beyond that, the boundaries of complete text are not always explicit or clear-cut. This is especially the case in speech. For example, suppose you are having a conversation with your friend Trisha and her friend Amy walks up in the joins of conversation. A little later, you need to leave, but Trisha and Amy continue to talk. How many conversations have there been? And where are the boundaries of each? For example, did the conversation between Trisha and Amy begin with Amy arrive or when you left? In the following modules, we use the notion completes of text in cases where it relatively clear-cut, such as for a complete research article that has a distinct beginning and an ending. In the other cases, we use the more general term text as a cover term for an extended segment of discourse from speech or writing. Text can be described according to the context, considering the characteristics of people who produce the text, and the characteristic of the situation and communicative purposes associated with text. The general term variety is used for a category of text that share some social or situational characteristic. For example, a national variety of English refers to the text produced by the speakers or English who reside in a specific country. Much of the research in sociolinguistics has focused on the varieties that are associated with different groups of speakers, geographic regions, different socioeconomic classes, ethnic groups, women versus men, and etc. These socially defined varieties are referred to as dialects. The present course deals instead with text varieties that occur in a particular situation of use registers, genres, and styles. Our primary focus in the course is the notion of registers and the process of registers analysis introduced in the following section. However, we return to a fuller discussion or dialects versus registers in the section 1.3.4. Registers analysis and overview. As noted above, we focus primarily on the register perspective in this course because it can be used to describe any text from any variety. However, the methodological techniques used for registers analysis are also applicable to the genre and style perspective. In the present section, we provide an overview of register analysis, establishing the foundation that will be used throughout the course. Then in section 1.4, we provide a fuller introduction to the grace and style perspective in comparison to the register perspective. In general terms, registers is a variety associated with a particular situation of use. The description of a register covers 3 major components: the situational context, the linguistic features, and the functional relation between the first 2 components. Registers are described for their typical lexical and grammatical characteristics, their linguistic features, but the registers are also described for their situational context, for example, where they are reproduced in speech or writing, where they are interactive, and but their primary communicative purposes are one of the central arguments of the course, and the linguistic features are always the central arguments of the course. Registers can be identified and described based on the analysis of either complete text or a collection of text excerpts. This is because the linguistic component of registers identification of the persuasive linguistic features in the variety. Linguistic characteristics that might occasionally occur in the text but are especially common in the target register. This is a persuasive linguistic feature that are clearly functional as specified below. Situational varieties can also be described by analyzing language features that characterize complete text referred to as a generalized perspective in the present course. General features are not persuasive, rather they may occur only the time in complete text. Often in the beginning or end of the text, they are also open.